I didn't see necessarily Kelly Lisner on the list, but Kelly, are you here? No. Zachary Larnard, I see your name.
Here.
Okay, great. Kateri Garcia, I think I saw you. There you are.
I'm here.
Okay. Stephen Littner, don't see him on the list. Cynthia Hilton, and Sally Hoekstra was absent with notice, so she is not here. David Goodman, is he on yet? No. And then Rebecca Hunter, also not. And then finally, Adam, I believe I saw you on.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. Okay, great. So that gives us 4. We definitely do not have a quorum as of now, but I would say let's get started, and then let's, Michael, if you can help me keep track of who might be coming in as we begin. And then I guess welcome JFAC. This is a joint meeting with JFAC. Stacy is on chair from JFAC. I don't know if you wanted to welcome people or no.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, and thank you for hosting us, FAC and APS. We're looking forward to this presentation.
Okay. Oh, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, just is Stacy, I only know a couple members of JFAC off the top of my head, and I can go back and look, but can we just, for, you know, simplicity, let's just acknowledge them, please?
Sure. Right now, the only JFAC members I see on the attendance list are myself and Steve Young.
That's what I thought. That's what I have down on my list.
Okay. I would just wanted to kind of quickly say that we will have a time period for public comment at the end of the session, at the end of the presentation, after we've sort of, you know, had time between FAC and JFAC to ask questions of the presentation. So we will make sure that we stop in time for that, to allow for that 25 minutes of public comment. If you want to, if you know you want to comment, then go ahead and add just a note in the chat, and then we'll keep track of how many and who is interested in making comments. And then we'll, before we do public comment at the end, we'll also have another kind of like, you know, put your name in the chat if you want to talk. And then otherwise, I don't know, Michael or other APS folks, if you wanted to introduce yourselves to the people that are on here, since it does look like we have a handful of public guests.
Yeah, I would like to just turn over sort of the introductions to our consultant team, if they don't mind just introducing themselves. We'll get into sort of the acknowledgements of the separate teams that have been sort of brought together in order to tackle this issue. But we can start with MTFA first, if they don't mind, since they're the leads.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Jancy with MTFA Architecture, joined here on screen with Michael Foster, one of the other principals with our office. And we've been working together with a group of consultants on this long-range planning project. And so Braden Field is also with our office, and he's here today. And then I'll turn it over to Bryce. Do you want to introduce yourself and CMTA?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Bryce Watson. I'm a mechanical engineer with CMTA. We've done a lot of work with Arlington Public Schools in the county in the past, and happy to work with them here and provide our services. Donnie, you want to?
Yeah. Hey, guys. Donnie Yaste, electrical engineer with CMTA. Been working with Bryce and APS the last several years, so excited to be on this one as well.
Great. And then we also have FEA is another partner on our team. Chris, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Hodges. I'm a principal with Facility Engineering Associates, and we're happy to be part of the MTFA team. And we provide mostly the condition assessment aspects and data management pieces of the project.
Thank you. So that's everyone from our team, Michael.
You're muted. You're muted.
Thanks, Megan.
Yep.
Appreciate that. And thank you, Rosa, for letting me know that. And just for what we have right now, I would like to introduce Ajibola Robinson, who's now sort of taken over the lead on the long-range plan to renovate existing school facilities. And he's one of our project managers, has been with APS for a long time. So of all you that aren't familiar with him, he will be working with us on this project moving forward. Besides that, we have some other members from APS that are on here, Eliana Gonzalez and Robert Ruiz, both from Planning and Evaluation. And we also have county representation on here from Matt Ladd. I'm going to bring up the agenda for you real quick here, okay? Let's see here. Okay, can everyone see that? Is that displaying properly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, and I made just last minute revisions on this just recently, and it's updated online as well. We had some last minute sort of presentation work put together, as well as some rearranging of the minutes to make them more clear as to what this meeting is about. On that note, I guess we can go ahead and get started on this. So let me bring up presentation. Okay.
Looks good.
Okay. So, let's see here. I'm gonna have a little bit of hard time seeing hands. Let me see if I can just go ahead and change this window size here. If you all just bear with me for just 30 seconds. Okay, good. That works. Excellent. All right. So, what we started out doing was giving everyone sort of an idea of the outline for this presentation. And then that's just summarized here. And we just tried to make it as sort of as true to the actual report itself. And by the report, what I'm referring to is the Existing Facilities Evaluation Framework Report, which has been brought together by MTFA and the other consultants. But to back things up even further, we wanted to talk about sort of how, or just provide the information as to when the long-range plan to renovate existing school facilities came about. And this is just the timeline for sort of the CIP process that it was actually the work now is being done from, is being funded from. And that's the fiscal year 23-32 CIP. This actually, the long range plan was part of the previous CIP board direction. So it was put in at the end of that CIP, the one prior to this fiscal year 23-32 CIP. And in there, it has stated that there was going to be a plan to look at renovating existing schools. Throughout that timeline, what we have here is the various public meetings that have been taking place. And in these, there has been the discussion around this particular CIP funded project. Certain things of highlight that should be noted is when the superintendent's proposed CIP had this as information item, when the school board actually had this as part of their proposed CIP, and when the school board finally adopted this as part of their CIP for fiscal year 23-32. And finally, it also has on there when it went before the residents of Arlington and was voted on. And that was back in November of 22. Concurrently, during that time, APS worked with the FAC in order to develop the framework for the long-range plan to renovate existing school facilities. And these are just sort of some of the meetings that took place where there was content related directly to the long-range plan, or the plan, as I sometimes refer to it as. And in here, it should be noted that even though it might not be part of the agenda, it was discussed in some fashion along the way. And more particularly important is that the subcommittee that was created to draft the framework and guidelines for this. The plan itself was known prior to being taken over by MTFA as attachment B is what it was referred to. And you can see that on the previous slide here where it goes, I go back one and it has attachment B on there. That was all the information that was compiled by the FAC. So this has been around now for, over 10 months. We've been working on this diligently with the FAC in order to get it to where it is now. And what we've done is we turned it over to MTFA in order for them to just go ahead and say, okay, how's this framework look? And that's where we go right now. We brought on MTFA as the prime, and we have the supporting roles as mentioned earlier by Facility Engineering Associates and CMTA, and that was in November of 2022. Since we already made those introductions, we can just go ahead and move into the next subject matter here. And the next subject matter that we have is in reference to sort of the overall project timeline. The overall project timeline for this was created as a way to manage expectations and to work within the budget of the CIP itself. The reason why I say that is because it breaks it down into two separate tiers, and the first tier that we're in right now is actually broken down into two other parts, and we're in stage one. And in stage one, what we're doing right now is we're evaluating the framework. We're making sure that what we, the FAC and APS staff, provided makes sense. And through that process, MTFA and the consultants have done a fantastic job in taking our information and checking to make sure that it's relevant, it's tested, it could be updated, and they've done a really good job. The second part of the first tier will be and is provided more detail in the actual draft report that's been provided. And the second part is going to actually be the evaluation of the facilities based on the framework that we're doing right now and what we're going over. That still has to have another final phase of this, which is going to be tier 2. And that's going to be sort of a deeper dive into the facilities that will be selected by the school board to be presented into the next upcoming CIP. So what did they do, MTFA, with all our data that we provided them? Well, we provided them a wealth of data. We provided them not only quantitative data, but qualitative data related to facilities. And that's one thing to keep in mind too, is that this is a facilities advisory committee. So our focus for this whole report was on the facilities themselves, on the built environment. And what they did is they came up with a way to provide quantitative data to the facility through a facility condition index and provide a qualitative and a quantitative summation of some building characteristics that the group identified. Those two things combined would then allow us to have what is considered a facility condition assessment. So when we think about the facility condition index, which is one part of the facility condition assessment, it looks into specific sort of deferred maintenance, accumulated degradation. It has the expected useful life. It does a very good job of looking at what we have right now with our major systems and using the uniformat code goes ahead and provides a way to compare from a standard and between facilities. So it provides us with a way to rank and measure our different systems that we have against each other and against a standard that's provided nationwide. The building systems for the FCI, as I mentioned earlier, these are just some of the summary of the select building systems that they used. And in this summary, we can just see some of the important ones that we, the FAC and APS, identified. And these are, very crucial to the way that a facilities advisory committee operates. We go to each of the different facilities and we look at these types of components all the time, where we have the exterior, the interior. We discuss fire, life safety. We constantly have been discussing heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, and many of the other systems identified in here. At this point, when we get to the rating system, I would like to go ahead and turn it over to MTFA if they don't mind, because I think that they would do a little bit more credit for the work that they've provided here in describing sort of the rating system that they came up with.
Sure, I can tag in, Michael. Thank you. So
Thanks.
as you mentioned, for all of the facility condition index items, we're looking at them with a rating system. So it's a very simple rating system from 1 to 5. Again, we're trying to keep this as quantitative as we can for these items. And you can see there's associated deficiencies with each of those ratings. And the other thing to keep in mind with the rating is it's actually being applied along a curve, looking at the degradation of that item over its expected life. So items with a longer expected life will have a different curve applied to them. And that rating then kind of extrapolates that method. And so it's very simple, 5 being the highest, green, 1 being the lowest is red. And on to the next slide. So the building characteristics index is the second side of the approach that Michael just described. If the condition index is looking at the bones of the building with just the system's age and condition of the facility itself, the characteristics are these extra elements and environmental items, things like programming, performance, the way spaces are laid out, and whether they meet educational spec requirements. These are elements outside of the simple base facility condition. And what we did is we wanted to build on the great foundation that was provided in that attachment B when we started the project. A lot of really smart work went into that, and we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, but we did go through that whole list and litigate it pretty closely, where we were able to refine certain things and define how they were being measured, and dig a little deeper to build on that rather than reinventing it. So this list that was produced went out in the draft report, and it includes a whole category of items, and the next slide covers some of those, which are really looking at building systems beyond just the system's age and condition itself. So it's looking at how the air quality is performing, whether the ventilation standards and design capacities are being met, things like filtration, whether interior and exterior lighting meet current standards from a temperature or controllability standpoint. And then we're also looking at benchmarking water use intensity and energy use intensity for each of the buildings across the portfolio. And so these items are given a rating, and the full building report then gets an index. That's called the FCI, the Facility Condition Index. And that is given a number from 0 to 1. And that index is basically a result of the cost compared to the condition. So it's looking at the cost relative to its current replacement value for the full project based on the status and rating of all the aspects of it. And then it's comparing that to, in today's dollars, the cost to replace that. And this is a ratio 0 to 1. Again, we're using the traffic light approach, where good, green, fair is yellow, and red in need of replacement is that lower value. And again, just a very simple 1 to 5 traffic light rating, trying to simplify the metrics here. And Megan's going to talk a little bit about the cost for that current replacement value and how we arrive at that number.
So as Braden mentioned, in order to create the index, there's a cost associated in a large spreadsheet, the idea of the cost to replace the current replacement value. And we just want to make sure it's clear that those costs are really the raw costs. Those are not actual costs if you were to go out to bid to get the project done. But those are really a way in which we're able to rank the systems and be able to place this across all of your schools. There is the ability to create an anticipated future needs cost based upon those raw costs, and that is using a cost multiplier. And what that cost multiplier takes into consideration are local labor costs and pool availability, the design fees or construction fees, overhead and profit that would normally be attached to a contractor's responsibilities when they place the bid, as well as additional costs and other contingencies and existing condition markups. That is, that multiplier gets us today's dollars. And then you can use that again to add inflation and long range planning numbers in order to understand how to project costs out over the future. So as the CIP planning process goes on, you're able to actually use this as a tool to plan future costs, but keep in mind that the numbers we're using just for comparison is a raw cost and not those anticipated project costs.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Brandon. That was good. So that leaves us with what our next steps are. And when we think of our next steps, as identified in this presentation, we'll be receiving the framework report, right, as the end of stage 1. And then when we get to stage 2, what we will be receiving is we'll have to have a notice to proceed to stage 2 upon approval of stage 1. But once that happens, we'll then receive a draft facility evaluation report. And what this will do is this will provide the information in the report that is similar to the 4 schools that were chosen to test this framework. And if you look at the report, what that does is it chooses 4 schools of relative age, and we wanted to do a test fit for this. And the evaluation report will have the same output as those 4 test fits that we have, so that we have a way to sort of gauge and quantify the various components that we have within our facilities. And then that would be the end of what we have as tier 1. And then that would go ahead and feed into the fiscal year 25-34 planning, right? When that starts in, man, what is that? 2024 September for the CIP. And what that will entail is then we'll go ahead and identify a certain number of facilities. It will actually have all the facilities, but what we're going to have the school board do is the school board is going to have to go ahead and decide at some point, based on staff recommendation, which probably will come from the cabinet, as to how many facilities would move further into the tier 2 section of this whole system of plan. And the tier 2 section would be a much deeper dive into certain components of our evaluation. So I see that Jeff Chambers is on now. So if Jeff would like to go ahead and say something real quick on this last slide, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think Michael has us set up, and I think I've been on for a little bit here, but I think we've got a great team. I think things are moving forward. I think we really are comfortable with the direction and matrix that we've worked out with all the input that we've had from the FAC and others in the community. And I think that as Michael was saying, is the board will be the ones that gives us the direction for the tier 2. And as some of these items may not be a full building, it may be a major item in one particular building that may have to be addressed, or it may be a major building. Again, that's really going to be up to the board to make that final determination. And then we will be taking that information and creating the next year's CIP, you know, for 10 years out. What would we be doing on renovations in setting up funding for that? So that is essentially where we're headed with all of this, and it takes a lot of cooks to make this stew. So I think we're very comfortable with the direction we're going, and the purpose for tonight is to allow you to ask particular questions and maybe raise some concerns. Thank you for being here.
All right, excellent. So I think we did that a little longer than what we anticipated, but not bad. Thank you, everyone, for participating. And I would like to go ahead and just give a reminder for those that might have come into the meeting later, that if anyone from the public that's outside of the FAC and JFAC would like to have a opportunity to ask some questions in the public comment section, to just go ahead and please put your name into the chat so that we will know that you've made this an official request, and we can go ahead and note that when we get to that section. But now I'm going to turn it over to Rosa and to, I guess, Stacy.
Yeah, so I think what I was hoping to do is just get a couple questions from FAC and then a couple questions from JFAC, and maybe move the discussion back and forth a little bit. I see Kateri already put in a question into the chat, and I've kind of jotted a couple down myself. So if Kateri, if you want to go ahead and read out your question, you can. Or
yeah, sure, I can expand too. So obviously there's a lot of description of kind of how, like, function of facilities, of all of the different, you know, whether we're talking about ventilation and such. And yeah, thank you. I'm interested though in the definition in the document of what the tier 1 assessment is trying to do. It talks about that it's trying to determine the ability essentially of the infrastructure to deliver basic services. But I didn't see what basic services were defined as in the actual document. And I'm just kind of curious how you're factoring in kind of the population of the school or the usage of the different facility, because that to me seems like you would factor that in order to understand whether you're providing the basic services or not. And so just wanted to hear a little bit more of that about that.
Not everyone jump at this question at once here.
I'll try to take a stab at it. I think that, you know, as we noted, that there are really, you know, the facility condition index and then the building characteristic index. I think what you're talking about is the building characteristics. They're the specifics of APS. And we've given that information to the team. And that is also one of the criteria that we are looking at. So we are looking at the capacity. The facilities condition index really is trying to look at, you know, the age of the facility, the systems, and, you know, how much life do they have left in them and all of that. The building characteristics are the specifics that we would be looking at from an APS standpoint that aren't general. They're the specifics would be in that. And that's where you would be looking at the capacity, you know,
okay,
and
so
our specific.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to make sure I understood that part, which is that, so in this, like, we're building characteristics, that's what it's called, right? You would, for example, determine that the gym is large enough to meet all the needs, and then that would be factored in. I guess I just didn't see where that was in the document. And maybe it would just be worth highlighting a bit further so that it was kind of clear to the reader.
Sure. So attachment C does list every single piece of criteria that's evaluated, and there are 2 columns. Each column is identifying, there's a column on the left, which is your facility conditions index, and then there's a building condition characteristics column, and that is saying if it is in those metrics or not. So if it's, there you go. So the column on the left is indicating that it's a facility condition number. And if it's checked on the right, then it's a condition characteristic. It measures, it tells you what exactly is being evaluated, whether and how we're measuring that. Many of these cases, it's how big is it relative to the number of students, and specifically the cafeteria or the gymnasium. You know, what is the overall size and length and width of the building itself in order to meet the needs And these are being evaluated both by reviewing drawings as well as observation in the field. So we are going and reviewing all of these conditions with eyes in the field as well. And so attachment C really goes in depth on how each of those are being evaluated.
Thank you. I think that actually hits on some of my questions too, because I saw the curve, and now that I'm looking at attachment C a little bit more, I can see that there's certain things within that criteria that specifically call out that you're measuring it, you know, against the degradation curve, which to me is that kind of end of useful life, the curve that you showed. But then that kind of leads me to understand that specific curve that's end of useful life and, you know, whatever, is not necessarily applicable to all criteria. It's just those things that literally you're measuring, you know, the maintenance, the use of end of useful life for that item.
Correct.
Okay. And then, but all of them do have the stoplight kind of like red, green, yellow
Yeah.
color kind of coding.
Correct. So when we see the final output and a report card, you can dig down into each of the systems within the school itself, right? Each category gets its own color. But then there's also the high level report cards where you can then score the overall buildings overall, and then you can look portfolio wide. So really allowing all tiers of information to be evaluated so that you can see not only across your entire portfolio of buildings, but then you can dial in on any one particular characteristics. So if, for instance, there was this desire, we know in the past there's during COVID, there was a lot of concern about filtration. So you could isolate that one element and begin to look at that across each school. So there's really a large database that supports all of this information and allows it to be evaluated.
Okay, thank you. I do see a couple more questions from FAC in our chat. I don't know if you wanted to, and Stacy, you have your hand up, so I didn't know if we wanted to kind of switch back and forth between FAC and JFAC, but.
I'm willing to sort of follow your lead on this, Rosa.
Okay, well, then I was gonna maybe just go to Adam's next question. I mean, you did have your hand up, so I don't know when that happened, but.
I think Adam asked his question before I put my hand up, so
okay.
I'll wait my turn.
Yep. Adam, if you want to read.
Hopefully, sure. Hopefully it'll be really quick. I just wanted to know there's a lot about, you know, the decision making and the process, but I didn't see anything in there about what the FAC's role is going to be moving forward in this process. So if we can get some more information about what the expected role is, how will FAC be consulted during this process, and what role we'll have in recommendations to the board based on the results of the studies.
Yeah, I think we would be reporting out to you on where we are on the study and the information, and sharing that information, because the board would probably want you to weigh in, or the FAC to weigh in on the report that we give to them and the recommendations we may be making. So I think we would be sharing that with you. I think it would be sort of like our typical CIP process going forward. Once we identify the buildings, then we would be coming to you with the things that we are looking at including in the CIP. We typically share, the projects that we do studies of, because the fall before we do the spring CIP, or the superintendent provides the CIP recommendation, we end up doing studies, and we let you know what the studies are, the projects that we're doing, and you can weigh in on that.
Okay. If it's possible, I think it would be good just to more formalize that, and making sure that it's if we're going to, whenever we're kind of showing what the process is, that FAC consultation be listed in there, so that it's not something that is something we have to depend on someone remembering to do that. Not that you will forget, but just to make sure that it's in there.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that, Adam. And I will say that's duly noted, but just as a reminder, and I'm sure everyone's already aware, but it's the Advisory Council on School Facilities and Capital Programs. So, I mean, we always seek your input when it comes to the CIP. But I'll make a note to make sure that we,
List it.
yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so go ahead, Stacy, then let me turn it over to you
Okay.
for a question.
Thanks. I just have a broader kind of clarifying question about tier 1 and tier 2. So right now, this report is listing 4 pilot schools that, that I understand is it's just a pilot, and this report is currently a draft. Just clarifying that. And so does tier 1 include what we will see in the 4 pilot schools for all of the schools?
Yeah,
Or
I
will-
think, yeah.
And
I-
then,
yeah,
okay,
oh.
I'll let you answer that question first,
Okay,
and then I have
good, because you always
a
make me
question about.
forget the first one.
Okay, that's
your
good.
second.
And then I'll have just a question, a question that I hope that will help you clarify tier 2.
Sure. Yeah. Well, tier 1. I mean, essentially, what we've done here is we look at the 4 projects that we did is really only to test the matrix and see how things are going to go. We will be doing all facilities with the same criteria, so that we basically build a matrix that shows us, our facilities, from best to not as best. I also want to say that, our facilities are all habitable, they're all usable, they were all built to code, and all of those things. So, we have to be careful when we start talking rankings. It's not, these are our worst schools. It's not, it's just that they have things that need to be addressed. But essentially, we're trying to create that list because we believe that based on the 4 test fits that we did, that we are going to see, how things do show the needs for renovations and/or something major and specific, which could be from an infrastructure bond versus the typical CIP. So we may look at, all of that because we've never done this evaluation before, and I think the doing all of the facilities is going to tell us so much. And it's also not something that's dead at that point. The intent is this matrix can be reused and reused every 4 or 5 years, whatever, when we have to recategorize because things change, as we all know. So we need to look at that as part of our matrix. And I think even if we would start to grow again, we should be looking at this matrix as well to try to help us categorize where the opportunities are to build more seats when we have to do that again. So I think this is really a tool that's going to be ongoing, and it's a forever thing as long as we keep it up. So that is the goal. And then tier 2 is essentially looking at all of these and then working with the board, working with the FAC, having conversations on what are we going to do the studies on as far as the in-depth cost analysis, and why. And it has to be based on the tier 1 analysis, so that we're building it on data and not just because I like that school, I want to do that one first. I think that's what we're really trying to do. So that's the deep dive. And then the ones in tier 2, for the most part, should end up in the CIP, as in what year they would be getting done with the value and all of that, like we typically have done with, trying to build new seats. We would be doing the same thing with the renovations. Does that help?
It does. Thank you. I mean, and I will just take this opportunity to just thank all of you for doing this, because I think it is a very valuable tool for APS, and it's a very data-driven. It gives you very data-driven information, where it does sort of take out the I don't know, the emotion or the politics, or it just shows us which schools really need the most work. And so just to clarify too, you're moving into tier 2, it will be for the board to decide the number of schools which move into tier 2. And from there, you kind of look at what are you taking a deeper dive into in tier 2 to look at to help prioritize which school of those chosen smaller numbers moves up to the highest priority.
Yeah, I think that's really going to be a board decision. I think it could be based on recommendations. It could be based on, I mean, we're still going to be looking at where growth is in APS, and is that going to help make a decision, you know, beyond just the condition. So, I mean, we are going to be looking at it holistically, because that's the only way we can make a rational decision and make a rational recommendation. You know, I'm not, it's not because it's in my neighborhood, I want to do that one first, because I'm tired of my neighbors complaining. You know, our goal is to look at it as, you know, what makes the most sense for the county as a whole, for our educational facilities. So that's, you know, really where it's going to go. And I think the other thing that may be something is say it becomes the top of the list is 4 middle schools. You know, are they going to want to address 4 middle schools first and not address any elementaries? I don't know. I mean, it could be all elementaries at the top. Until we go through this and look at the categorization, I don't know where they're going to end up, because, you know, it was very interesting watching the 4 test fits that we did and seeing where they came out. They didn't all fit exactly where I thought they would end up. You know, they're in the ballpark, but it's not exactly what I thought. So I think that we're going to find out. We're going to probably have some surprises, and we're going to probably have some, you know, yeah, that's exactly what I thought. You know, so that's, I think, better than what we did, you know, 5 years ago when we were looking at places to put a potential school and additions and renovations and all of those other studies we did. We did it based on enrollment projections and, you know, where we thought we had a school that needed the most work, and maybe the smaller school, you know, where we could put the addition or where we could put a replacement building. So those are, I think it's going to be a more data-driven decision, which is going to probably, or should be, more appropriate.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And I will just leave on one more comment, kind of bit of praise, which is I like, you know, I think this framework is also a very valuable tool because it's replicable. You can do it, you know, in a timely manner. It doesn't have to happen every year or every 2 years, but, you know, it is
Right.
replicable, where you could go back and sort of fill in the, you know, kind of fill in the blanks again and end up prioritizing school based on data. But thank you for all of your hard work on this, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. So Cynthia, I'm going to hit you in a second because you're the next person with the question, but I'm talking still to what Stacy and Jeff were just talking about. I had some additional questions related to that. So in terms of, you know, one of the things that you had mentioned, Jeff, was how this kind of plays into this document will help to show the needs. And so I was wondering how it might be attached to or incorporated into the AFSAP, the you know, the student accommodation plan, facilities and student accommodation plan, which also focuses on needs. So is that something that will help to inform that, or vice versa? Is it just a backup document, or does it have any role? And then I'll have another question after.
Yeah, I think that the fact that we have the time to incorporate that, because we're going to have, you know, the study done of all of our facilities about the time of the next AFSAP, so they can, you know, look at that. We can put those together before the board makes a final decision on which projects go first. The AFSAP will be done again, and we will also have all of this data and a deeper dive looking at the ones we think are the worst. So, you know, when we do a CIP, you have to realize what we do is it's kind of a dance between schedule, dollars, and need and population. So you've got all of those things that we try to juggle and look at and say, what does it make the most sense? And sometimes it's just because of dollars we end up flip-flopping something, or whatever, because we don't have the big dollars this year, but in 2 years we do have the bigger dollars, or however that may work out. So it's, you know, if you recall the chart that we typically use for the CIP when we've done the 10-year and we set everything out, we always make sure that all of the categories and numbers work. And it's all based on the data that we have, if that helps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then somewhat related in terms of kind of that FSAP timeline CIP, you had talked about tier 2 being that deeper dive into a handful of schools. Would that have like more realistic cost estimates that can be attached? Would those then become, you know, based on selections by the board, become a project within the CIP with sort of a known, generally known value, or where?
Yeah, I think when we get into that deeper dive, that is exactly what we would be doing, is we would be actually doing the typical design and/or estimating that we typically do for a CIP, so that we have those dollars when it does, you know, get inserted, the projects actually get inserted into the project or into the CIP. So we would have more definitive dollars. Now with tier 1, we're going to have some dollars, and they're going to be able to, the dollars are really being set up to not be a final cost, but to be in current dollars in a straight comparison between facilities, so that you can say X elementary school and P elementary school, wow, this one needs an, you know, $300,000 or $300 million or $3 million more than that building. But wow, I thought that building was worse. So you can look at it that way, but it gives you the basics so that when we're thinking about, you know, gee, we typically have X number of dollars available in a 10-year CIP, you know, so we can't pick to do $500 million worth of work when we know we're only going to have $250 million over the next 10 years. So it does give us that ability to look at the numbers that, you know, we did the tier 1 facility study on.
And then Cynthia, you're up. So if you want to unmute, you can ask your question.
Okay, can you hear me?
Perfect. Yes, perfect.
Okay, thanks. All right, so first of all, to everyone, I apologize for being late. I don't know why I had 7 o'clock. It's all on me in my head, but I do apologize. So any question I ask, if it's been answered, I don't want you to have to do it again. Just I'll call somebody later. In the report, I was looking on page, I guess most of these can be referenced. So this is a web page, not exactly whatever page, 25. It has 4 schools listed, and it's doing, it says it's a building characteristic summaries, just so you know what I'm looking at. And so I'm wondering, I'm sorry, because when I was able to join, are these the 4 schools that you were talking about, or is this, so that's first question, whether or not these are the 4 schools that you were referencing that you were going to pick. Can someone just say yes or no before I move on?
These were the 4 schools we did the test fit on to make sure that our matrix was working.
Oh, okay. So they're all elementary, and I'm just randomly guessing that maybe secondary high school might present a different bunch of factors, which causes me to point out that there are some facilities that are in high schools that you'd never expect in an elementary school. And how do you then, you know, say the money should go here, you know, when it's a facility that is not shared across all schools? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think that it doesn't matter whether it's a secondary or an elementary. We have criteria established that we will be comparing. We will be basically comparing middle schools against middle schools, high schools against high schools. But we will also be able to look at it, you know, if an elementary school and a high school and a middle school have 80% red lights. I think we'll take a deeper dive or a closer look at those to figure out why. We did elementary schools for the test fit because they were comparable. We were able to utilize the data tool and how does the inserted data show to us? How does it show us what we need to see? And it did, and I think that it will do the same for middle and high school. But yes, you are right that we know that our facilities are very different. But you know, when you're looking at the condition survey, I mean, you're looking at a condition survey, and you're also looking at the specific APS requirements. A school that doesn't that is at the end of its life cycle and doesn't meet our current APS standards, it's going to show really poorly, and it's going to be one that's going to need our attention or need us to look at it deeper. Not necessarily one to be picked for the deeper dive, but it will show, no matter what type of school it is, that it needs work or needs attention. So that's really the intent of this, and it is. There was a lot of debate and a lot of discussion to get to where we are, but we feel strongly that it will give us the information we need.
Okay, how do you turn this? I'm sorry, trying to turn that up. Thank you for that. And then this is, you know, just wonderful that you can present things this way. But if there understandably, there could be crises. I mean, there could be things that were not anticipated when you do these reviews of the schools, and I'm so sorry. So while you have done everything to be rational and plan ahead, and this is where we should devote our funds, is this the wrong forum to ask this question? But how do you address unanticipated crises, you know, things that need to be dealt with?
That's just a different process. Those processes will still be in place. It has nothing to do with it. This is a separate entity.
Okay,
Yeah.
even if you needed CIP funds?
Jeff, can we talk about that a little bit about
Sure.
So if the greatest example of that, and I think Mike Fried is on here, which would be helpful for him to give me a hand. We recently had a switchgear issue at Taylor. Deferred maintenance on switchgears has always been something that maintenance services wanted to include in their operational budget, but it was something that was always sort of put to the side because it had a longer, let's say, shelf life. What we realized, though, was that that's something that needs to be included as part of their more frequently maintenance. And as a result of that, we had the issues this past year at Taylor. Those issues have been resolved at Taylor. And then as a result of that, we have developed a 3-year plan in order to address all the deferred maintenance that we have on our switchgears. Those monies now are being diverted from some of the MCMM reserve funds, probably not in Mike Frieda's. He's probably having a little uneasiness about that, but eventually it's going to be included in their operational funds. So this is an example of a crisis that happened, Cynthia, and how APS was able to respond to it, and how that is going to be another reason why this type of document needs to be, it has to be a dynamic document. It can't just be a static document, because you have stuff like that might happen, and then it affects the whole system. So
Right. And maybe if you're doing these, systematically, periodically, whatever, maybe you start to see a place that there's failure before there's actually, big problem. Okay, I think I will, other than I would just note, just to make sure I'm reading it correctly, because I don't see a key. But again, on this page 25, when it kind of has, to me, it looks like dark blue, but maybe it's dark gray. Does that just mean that facility is not in that school? Is that what the dark gray means on that?
I think it's this. Is you referring to, like, let's say this down here, what I'm trying to touch on? I know it's probably hard to see, but I think that's a black circle, meaning that
Yeah, okay, black. black. Yeah,
Yeah.
whatever color you want to call
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I think that's indicating that those spaces are not applicable to be subject to a score because they're not identified or located within
Okay,
this particular facility.
okay. I have other questions, but maybe I'll just put them,
Okay.
I'll send them to you. I love you all. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia. Yeah, let me jump to Adam. I see Kateri's questions in the chat as well, but let me jump to Adam because he had a question about how often will Tier 1 assessment be conducted after the initial assessment, and that kind of ties into what we were just talking about.
I don't think we've determined that yet. We want to get through it one time and see what it tells us. And I think that we're probably looking at probably every 4 years, plus or minus, would be appropriate. I think 2 years is too soon. But I think that probably 4 years, maybe 6, I don't know. I think we need to see what it's telling us and how it affects our CIP and then look at what would be the most valuable use of the tool. So we want to make sure that we're getting the most out of it. So I think we'll have to make that determination, but we've already started talking about it. So we will be looking at it as an ongoing thing.
Okay. And then go ahead, Kateri, you're next. You had sort of 2 comments in the chat.
Yeah, I had a comment in the chat, but and then I had a question, but I do have another specific question. And first I will say thank you guys for all your hard work. I am glad not to be doing it, but I am very interested and I have lots of questions. So back to this question of kind of the classroom adequacy. I'm confused because I don't in educational or common space and educational space adequacy. So I'm looking at page 25 of the actual document, you know, and if I look at Ashland, Barcroft, and Fleet in the educational space adequacy, I'm confused by, so you see red in 1.1. If anyone doesn't have the document up, I don't know if you guys want to show it. I'm just looking at the document online. But then there's also some greens for kind of classrooms, general 1 through 4 and 1 through 5. I am confused because if I look back at the appendix on how it's describing what they mean by those kind of 1.1 through 1.5, I admit I don't entirely understand what's being evaluated. And specifically for those first 3 elementary schools, I think they all have relocatables. So I'm confused by how you would say that you had the right number of classrooms if you have relocatables at the facility and kind of how that factors in. It seems to me that you would then at least get a yellow or for the number of classrooms if you can't fit within the building.
Thanks,
I can
Brian.
clarify that. I can clarify that a little bit. So first of all, the relocatables are not considered in this analysis. This is looking just at the base building. The relocatables are a separate criteria. So we basically pulled those out. And if you go back up to that attachment C, you'll see basically what we've done is defined a standard on the right there in the notes, which for kindergarten and pre-K, the desired spec size for the classroom is 1,040 square feet with a toilet. For first grade, it's 870. And then for upper level classrooms, it's 825 square feet. And we're basically evaluating all the classrooms in that base building and looking at whether or not they meet that minimum square footage requirement. If all of them meet it, it's green. If some of them meet it and fall within 10% of that, then it's yellow. And if there's any classrooms that fall outside of a 10% variable of that desired square footage, then it gets red. So you are correct that you're seeing all 4 of the elementary schools are showing a red. That means that they have at least one classroom that doesn't meet that minimum square footage requirement. But it could only be one. So that would trigger, you know, maybe looking at a tier 2 assessment that drills down into each school and looks at, is it multiple classrooms? Is it only a couple? And what can be done and evaluated potentially to address that? That would be a tier 2 level. So this is really just trying to highlight an issue.
Okay, so then what is the next one, number 2, 1, 2, number of classrooms? If that, I mean, I guess what I'm kind of trying to present is, and I'm a little concerned that you said you've just removed the portables entirely, because then does that mean they're not considered in any of the air quality? I mean, are they completely discarded from this? I would think you should include them because it is an educational space that's being utilized by the school. So yeah, so I would think number of
correct.
classrooms.
Those are not being evaluated currently.
Okay.
And then back to your first question, that 1.2 criteria, that's actually an information only criteria. So that's not being reported in the report. You'll see it skips from 1.1 to 1.3. So that's actually not something that gets a rating. We're just reporting that as data only. So that's just kind of a data point that's giving total classroom number, and that will show up in the individual school report. And to your other point, that's also correct. Currently, this is not evaluating the relocatables for any of the ventilation or daylighting criteria, things like that. Those were excluded from it at the moment.
We are noting whether there's a relocatable there or not. The intent is that it's not a permanent structure. It's not counted in our capacities. We use that as overflow, and they are temporary. They're supposed to be temporary, and we want to remove them, and that's the goal. And actually, the way the county has it set up, if we have them for more than X number of years, we have to go and get a permanent location, which we don't want to do because we're going to pay as much for that as hard construction. So we are in the process of and relocatables are not the same systems, etc. Basically, they're electric unit ventilators, unit heaters. They have their own ventilation systems. Just so you know, we no longer have any leased units. They're all APS owned. So they're all newer than they were. A few years ago, we had a lot of rental units that were multiple years old. So we maintain those and take good care of those. But we understand they're not hard construction and they're not the same quality as what a hard construction should be.
So
I mean, I would specifically, sorry, just to wrap this up, and then I don't know if I'm the only one who cares about this, but it seems to me that you should then factor that in somewhere. I know you mention it in that one section where you're talking about the different facilities and how many relocatables, which is where I kind of found that data in the document. But it seems to me like you would still want to factor that in then, especially if you're talking about a timeline in which you need to remove them. I don't know. It just seems like it's kind of a strange thing to totally and completely exclude. But I will defer to others. I don't know if anyone else agrees with me on this.
yeah, I mean, my question was sort of related. So if it's not tracked here, then, and it sounded like what you were saying, Jeff, is that you automatically, as soon as you have relocatables on site to serve the capacity that that school currently has, that you already know and track the fact that that school then is like over capacity. Is that, I mean, I don't know how to really say that, but
yeah.
good.
Can I
Go,
present
Michael.
that one? Yeah.
Yeah.
I noted what you put down, your suggestion, Kateri, on that, and I'm going to have a discussion further with among APS staff and eventually consultants as to possibly including certain elements of the relocatables in this plan. But in the meantime, so it's Articles 12 and 18 of ASCO, which is the Arlington Zoning Code Ordinance. Was recently, maybe 3 years ago, updated to include relocatables as a short-term use on the site. As part of the facilities optimization study, separate from this, which looks at and is another process that FAC helped create, what that does is it evaluates where relocatables can be placed at a facility based on constraints inflicted on the cafeteria space, which is like sort of the choke point of a facility. But back to the amendments that were made to ASCO, it's a 3-year that we're allowed to have them on there. After that, we have to ask for an additional 3 years. 6 years is supposed to be the max. What I recommend to put into the new facilities optimization study is a ledger that identifies the relocatable status as to when the permits were pulled, when we need to get permits reviewed. These conditions are not necessarily enforced by Arlington County on APS, so let's just keep that in mind. We're doing this as good stewards and to the residents and the community to note these conditions that we have or their presence on our sites. And to note, Ashland does not use these relocatables for instructional space to accommodate overcapacity at the school. The relocatables at Ashland are currently being used for extended day use. So students go in and out of there for extended day, whether that means that they're in there just for a little bit, you know, maybe chilling, hanging out, and then they go back outside and they run around, and then they go into the gymnasium. It's not currently being used. And then we have other facilities where they are being used for instructional space. So we really need to come up with a plan as to how we manage keeping relocatables on our site. So I appreciate you bringing that up, but I would like to go ahead and add that additional comments we should have at another FAC meeting in regards to sort of our responsibility as to when and how they should be removed.
Yeah, I agree, Michael. I think that's, I mean, they are not our hard asset and they can be removed at any time. So again, we don't want to put a lot of effort into the reloads because they're supposed to go away. Granted, they are still there and we still use them, and you know, we do understand that. So I agree with Michael, and maybe we need to look at it in a different way, but we are acknowledging them. And you know, as Michael said, there are some places they use them for enrichment, some places they use them for extended day, some they use them for capacity. Some it's not necessarily capacity, it's just that they have small classes, you know, for whatever reason for their academic program. So if you look at the total capacity or the total population on that campus, they should fit in the building, but they don't because they have multiple classes that are at 15 instead of 22 or 23 or whatever the max number is. So there's all kinds of things to look at, and we've chosen that we really need to look for the facility study at our hard assets. So we'll move from there and see what else we can do with it.
Okay, great. So Kateri, if I can, I'm going to move to the other people. Okay. So Steve, you've had your hand up for a while, so let me move to you. I think Steve, you are part of JFAC, is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
Then go
Okay.
ahead. Yes.
Well, thanks, Rosa. Thanks to everyone for doing this and inviting us from JFAC to be here as well. This is a couple things more in the vein of comments or suggestions rather than questions, but I noticed that information infrastructure had been considered as an evaluation criterion and apparently ruled out. And that kind of surprised me as a former IT geek kind of guy, that information infrastructure was, you know, being sort of relegated to a secondary role, even though I saw that communications security was listed. Looking, you know, tried to drill down through the tier one, the first four. So I'm just a bit surprised. I get the point that it's not part of the, you know, like bricks and mortar, and it alone wouldn't prioritize the school renovation. But if you're looking at like the communications security kinds of things, they're actually all interrelated these days anyway. So like I said, that's more a comment than a question, but I certainly welcome feedback.
Yeah, Steve, I just wanted to say that APS is actually embarked on an IT upgrade system to look at you know, the Wi-Fi's and the instructional boards, and actually doing that as a separate upgrade that's going to be in the budget that will be done on a rotating basis, that they have a certain time period. I don't know if it's 4 years that they intend to change all of the infrastructure and then change it, in 4 years after that, and et cetera, et cetera. So they've actually set up a plan to upgrade the infrastructure or the technology that they had not done for years. There were a lot of schools that had the same instructional panels in front of the classroom for 15 years, maybe not that long, but you know what I mean.
A long time, right?
Actually set up an upgrade to do that. So that's kind of why we didn't put it here, because by the time we get to the CIP, they'll have already changed everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fast-changing area. Do you know whether that's also looking at the pipes, if you will, that are the actual fiber or whatever that's coming to the schools? Is that part of that review? Because that's the other thing that comes to mind as kind of an important question.
Yeah, I think that we work with our IS folks all the time, and the pipe that goes into the school is all through Connect Arlington. I don't think there's any issues with getting the information through the pipe that we need to get there. So I think that infrastructure has been modified over the years. And, because again, as you said, everything's integrated today. That's our telephone system. That's our information. It's everything.
Security for the most part. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and that's through the county's infrastructure. So we don't have an issue with that per se, and I don't think we will because it's generally fiber.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks for that. And the other thing is more just sort of a bit of advocacy, if you will, for sort of a more holistic evaluation process on what you might call the environmental, climate, energy, sustainability considerations. Like, you have a number of pieces in the criteria right now, like looking at the outdoor learning spaces, looking at the fields. There's a little bit on stormwater, but it's sort of siloed right now. And speaking for myself, I would love to see a somewhat more holistic review of the kind of sustainability package of each school, and how it's doing in that realm. Is it nothing but non-native landscape plantings that provide minimal ecological value, those types of considerations. So I freely say that's more a comment, more advocacy, but I wanted to say
no, thanks, Steve. That's very, very appropriate. And whenever we take on a project or one of the schools because of its faults becomes a project, then we do look at the sustainability and how can we improve that. I mean, APS has always tried to find ways to do that and work with stormwater. Since we carry our own permit, we really have to be conscious of that because we really can't meet all of the requirements. We have no taxing body to bring funding in to do it. So every project, we've got to do the maximum we can with that. So you are correct. We do that as we do a building. We can't, I would say we don't have the funding to take care of all of the educational and physical deficiencies and do that as a, criteria, that we would just do a building because of that. But when we do a building, we bring all of that to it.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. And I'm done. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah,
Okay.
Steve, I threw in the chat there just sort of our energy report cards, just so that you're aware that we do report on energy usage. I know that's just a portion of sustainability, but and we do have sustainability liaisons at select facilities as well that receive a stipend. So, and that is an ongoing thing. I would also like to encourage anyone that has the drive to support sustainability to go before the school board and recommend that we adopt policies related to sustainability, because a lot of times we are driven by our policies at APS. So thank you.
Okay, so we have about 10 minutes more of JFAC comment, and I think there's one more hand up, which is Adam's. And then if the public, I know that some people had already, and now Cynthia's raised her hand, so we'll see if we can get both of those comments in before we switch over to the public. So public people, I know a number of you have noted in the chat that you would like to speak, so we'll go down that list. So if there's anybody else that is from the public that would like to speak, We have, I think, 25 minutes devoted to that at the end, at basically starting at 8. So we got 10 more minutes. Okay, so Adam, you're up.
Yeah, just a couple quick things. I'm in the IT space as well, and I kind of looked at that and I said, yeah, that makes sense not to include IT, really, because I mean, by the time you get around to it, things change so much that they're quick, and I think for long range planning purposes, putting IT in there, I think could falsely, or shouldn't say falsely, but skew the need a little bit more than it should. And then getting back to the relocatables, I agree with Carrie that it's something that should be in there, but I think it's more just the capacity purpose, because for the conditions, since relocatables are generally considered to be newer, and they're not something that we want to be replacing anyway, to have them as condition criteria wouldn't, to me, make sense. But I do think that right now, I guess we said that the number of classrooms is a data point, but I'm wondering if maybe the number of the need for relocatables at a school, and how over time how much it's needed, should be sort of an indicator of whether the school's capacity is correct, and that should be a factor in terms of major renovation, or because clearly a school that is using relocatables for a long time should have should be larger in terms of its building capacity. So I'm not sure if it's, to me, it's like that's a place to go with the relocatables, and how they should factor into the building characteristics is in terms of a capacity criteria.
Yes. Yeah, Adam, I think that what we should do at our next meeting, I know we won't have that many meetings left, but I really need to put together what I propose to be added to the facilities optimization study in regards to relocatables, and what we expect from them. So I have a lot of relocatable notes, so thank you.
And then, yes, Cynthia, it looks like you will be the last FAC.
Okay, thanks. So back on that page 14, which is listing things that you're not including in the standards. And one of the things that is mentioned is pool water. You say it's an operational issue. And some of you know that I know an awful lot about pools. I don't know how many of you know that the HVAC that makes it possible to open the Wakefield pool is on life support, and I've been told it's going to cost about $1 million to replace that. If it totally fails, 1/3 of the swimming instructional program closes down, and there's a lot of equity and whole bunches of issues that kind of factor in. Anyway, so my question here is, could you just elaborate on that pool water standards and operational issue? How does that, how do things like, and I understand that HVAC for the pool is unique for the pool. It doesn't have other school uses, if you know what I'm saying. Could you just help me understand how things like that would factor into this evaluation when you're at the high school level, because you're not going to have these issues at elementary or middle?
I can speak to it quickly, and then
oh, go ahead, Braden.
Well, go ahead, Jeff. I was just going to point out that the circulation system itself, so the pump, the equipment that's driving the pool and the ability to meet those pool water standards is being evaluated as part of the facility, the SCI, the age and condition piece of it. And that does get a rating, but the water standard itself was not going to be evaluated because there wasn't a clear standard that was directly tied to the equipment for that, if that makes sense. And Jeff, feel free to elaborate on that.
Do you mean the
that-
water
that's-
standard is in terms of bacteria in the water? I'm so sorry. Or do you mean in terms of temperature of the water?
I think it's a combination of all of the above, the makeup, the whole thing. Because it's, you know, basically every pool has its unique water makeup per se, because of, you know, the water is in that pool for a very long time. I mean, it can be up to 10 years. It's the same water. It's just filtered and worked through. So you end up with different, you can't really compare the three pools. You just have to make sure that they're all comfortable, safe, and, you know, have the right chemical mix.
Right, which is a standard that you have to meet. So I'm just saying, it's, you know.
Yeah, but there's nothing to do a comparison of. And as Braden said, we are looking at making, you know, the systems working and, you know, the life of the system and that kind of stuff. We are looking at that. And yes, we are looking at the HVAC as part of that. And too bad we didn't do that years ago and looked at that system. But I know it had been looked at over the years at Wakefield. But it's one of those things that didn't get on the list. And don't forget, for COVID, there's a lot of MCMM work that did not get done and major infrastructure work that did not get done because of the funding.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think this is a good time to kind of transition over to public comment then. I went through the chat and I think we have 2 people that have signed up. If anybody else is looking to have public comment, that, you know, go ahead, stick your name in the chat, please. So Dima Hakura, and then also Joan McIntyre, I think, are the 2 names I have in here. And so I'll start with Dima. I don't think we have any specific time limit other than, you know, maybe keep it to about 5 minutes or something, or, you know, but if you have questions, then we'll certainly, that'll allow APS and the consultant to respond with answers to your questions.
No problem. It's not that long. Yeah. Good evening. My name is Dima Hakura, and I'm the VP of Policy for Arlington CCPTA. As you know, so many of our schools have been waiting for so many years for important and necessary upgrades and deferred maintenance to our facilities. The disparities between our schools is very marked. Some schools have been fortunate to reside in brand new facilities, while others languish in older facilities with plumbing problems, water fountains that do not work, antiquated HVAC systems, crumbling paint, stained carpeting, and older kitchens, only to mention a few of the deficiencies. The CCPTA will be monitoring this process carefully, and we're thankful that this project is finally underway. I understand that the emergency items that will arise will be taken care of, or situations similar to the switch issue that was recently revealed. But could other things also uncovered enter into the upcoming operational budget? And one thing that came up this evening is I really think that relocatables in schools should be factored in. Maybe the number of years that the relocatables have been at these schools, and in addition, the number of school hours, number of student school hours that are being spent in each school might be a good way to measure how much are these relocatables being used, because, you know, as somebody was saying, some schools use them only for after school or for a few group sessions, small group sessions or whatever, whereas other schools, I do know, for example, have a whole grade in relocatables. So number of student school hours would be a good way to be able to compare. The other thing is, I also do encourage that looking at some sort of sustainability factor, how energy efficient are these buildings, how are they handling, everything from stormwater management, are they 21st century buildings, and where are they on that spectrum? Because that, I think, will be valuable in comparing which schools should go first. that would be an additional factor to weigh in. Thank you.
Thanks. And then Joan McIntyre, you're on, please.
Yeah, I'm Joan McIntyre. I'm also actually the chair of the Climate Change, Energy and Environment Commission. And I just do think it's a good idea to use this kind of systematic evaluation. And I would strongly echo the other comments that have been made about sustainability. In particular, it's looking at the building systems and structure to get to carbon neutrality, supporting the county's goal for that by 2050, but even more importantly, given the climate crisis that we're dealing with, is we've got to reduce greenhouse gases by 50% by 2030. So we absolutely have to take every opportunity that we can to make sure that we're doing our part. And for this, I think we want to be thinking about, obviously, energy efficiency. That's a key criteria, and that's just a no-brainer. It saves the county money in the long term. But another crucial element is actually the systems and shifting systems that are fossil fuel based, usually fossil gas, to electric systems, high efficiency electric systems. The evaluation should actually really look more closely at potential for geothermal. Some of our newer carbon zero schools or zero energy schools already have them. And then of course, and I know there's already work being done on these in terms of the roof structures and make sure that they can hold solar panels as well. So that those really key items to get the schools to being carbon neutral and zero energy and using this as an opportunity and using the evaluations to actually highlight where these potentials are. And I would actually also note that I work with Eco Action Arlington and several other environmental organizations in the area. And we have been advocating with the school board to have a sustainability policy that would reflect getting to carbon neutrality as soon as possible and reflecting a lot of these elements. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there any others that added at the end? It does not look like it. So I don't know. Was there any other hands up? John Bloom. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, and I'll make it short because I think Joan McIntyre said it very well. I'll just add a couple of points. I haven't had a chance to study every detail here, but I started out by just looking for sustainability, just doing a search in the document. Sustainability, nothing returned. Carbon or carbon emissions, nothing returned. And so sustainability generally, and I would say in light of the climate crisis, carbon emissions in particular, just aren't, the words aren't used anywhere in here. And they should be a really significant criterion. The energy and energy use are referenced in EUI. And that's a good way to get at energy efficiency, but not as good a way to get to carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. Energy can be renewable or it can be fossil fuel, and so that distinction needs to be made. And as Joan mentioned, a key thing with every renovation is you need solar on the rooftop, and you need to end the use of fossil fuels in these buildings. That's how we get to our carbon neutral goal. And putting in new fossil fuel systems moving forward is just not sustainable. So I think there's room for more attention to those issues in the document. I know it's not easy, but it just seemed like kind of a significant omission. And I should mention I'm also chair of the local Sierra Club, and working with other environmental groups and the community really interested in seeing Arlington develop a sustainability policy, which it doesn't really have yet. Thanks.
Just add quickly is that one thing to maybe actually build into the evaluation is the carbon emissions of the building, and make that as part of the criteria is what is for the operations. And that's a good way of understanding and ranking and seeing what opportunities there are.
Okay. Okay, Jeff, you had raised your hand too. You go ahead. Jeffrey, Jeff, did you want us to talk?
No, I'm sorry. I must have hit that by mistake.
Okay.
Apologize.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm trying to find it here.
And then
There we go.
Stacy, go ahead. You had
Yeah, I just had a last minute kind of JFAC hat question. So many of APS facilities have community centers as part of them. Are those noted in these facility criteria, that they are there, or or that there are county facilities as part of these? Are they included in this criteria?
or if they're I mean, if it's shared facility like the
If
gym
it's a
or
shared
something,
facility, like like gym at TJ comes to mind first.
Yeah, we don't have that as a building characteristic. I think it would be an informational item that would be added to it, as to say, qualitatively, right? As just a analysis of the building, it has a community center in it.
Right.
I don't think that we are going to do assessment on the use of county space within our facilities.
Right. Yeah, I'm just wondering that, just if there is a notation that the gym at Thomas Jefferson Middle School is also used as a community center. Or, I don't know how many facilities still have, is there space still at the Drew? I mean, space at Drew Elementary used to have a community center space. Just I think as a notation, just as kind of a because it is a facility, it could just as a way for the county to also eventually keep track of their facilities as well. It was just a kind of a JFAC hat question.
Sure, no, that's good. I mean, we'll include that. I mean, I believe we provided the information, but we'll make note to say which facilities are joint use facilities.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I think if the joint use would keep us from doing anything that we needed to do educationally, we would be noting that as a specific, but that I don't believe is the case anywhere. I mean, really, even the joint use facilities are kind of used in a similar fashion as all of our schools are, that the county does use all of our schools after hours as community centers. So, I mean, all of our gyms, all of our, specific facilities, summer camps, etc., they all get used the same as a joint use facility.
It may also be helpful further down the road for CIP direction and joint funds, where if a building that has a county, a large amount of county use, needs a big renovation, it would be good to have it in a plan for the county to also know that they would have to also contribute to that if that's the way that it works. But anyway, thank you very much. I just thought I would add that piece in there.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, I've been sort of seeing if people are raising their hand or any other people in the chat, and I don't necessarily, see anything other than some additional comments on the sustainability and carbon emissions tracking. Let's see. So I think, let me just quickly flip back to people. Yep. So I don't know. I think we can adjourn. We still do not have, at least when I looked, I don't think we have a quorum, so we can't vote on our passing our last month's meeting minutes. So we will put that to a different day.
Yeah, we can't
2,
make
3,
action
4,
either
5.
as
Nope.
to, we can't make action either as to where our next meeting will take place, but you and I will have a discussion and we'll figure out where we would want to go on that.
Okay. Okay.
So, yeah, Jeff, would you like to thank all our consultants
Yes.
for their hard
No,
work,
I want to
please?
thank our consultants for being here. I mean, this is really a group effort. I mean, it's people from APS as well as our paid consultants. I really appreciate the effort. They've jumped into this with both feet, and we had to work through this as Michael can attest, and Rosa can as well. All of the debates, all of the subcommittee meetings that we had, trying to define what we were trying to do, sharing that information with MTFA and their consultants. I think we brought this to a very good conclusion at this point in time to create that matrix and way to pull this together. We'll definitely take under consideration the information that everybody shared with us this evening as we move forward. But I think it's a heck of a step for APS to take, because for 10 years while we were going through that massive growth, I think a lot of our existing facilities just didn't get all of the attention. I won't say they didn't get attention, because they did, but they didn't get this kind of attention to really do a deep dive and find out what the big issues are, the hot points are that need to be addressed in our facility. So I want to say thank you to everybody who's commented, as well as the consultants, and we're going to keep on moving forward with this and get the information to the board that they need to make the decisions that they need. And FAC, you will be involved in that, because we share it. It's a facilities matter. We're going to share it with you. So we'll keep that in mind, and I'm sure Michael will note that in a calendar somewhere.
Yeah, I'm very pleased with sort of the direction and the work that's been done. I think the consultant group did a great job, and obviously, you guys as well at APS to kind of lead that. And I think it is important to kind of see how we did the, how we left the Appendix B or whatever, that had gone in, and then, that was the last work that we had worked on with you guys, and to kind of see that turn into this and, fledged out, especially with the pilot studies, because we wanted, we thought that was an important part of the way in which this might, need to be vetted. And so seeing that, has been done is good, and gives more confidence that that the information being spit out, by the assessments will kind of allow, the board to make some decisions. So, yep. Yes, and Kateri will definitely hand out some gold stars to everybody. For
Yeah,
attending.
I should make cookies and only give it to those that attended this meeting.
Yep. All right. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if there's any other last words. Otherwise, I think we can adjourn. So.
All right, excellent. Thanks, everyone. Again, I do appreciate the residents taking their time in order to give us feedback on these important issues that we all vote on. So, and thanks again.
Yeah,
Thanks
that's
again
perfect
for
words.
having
Thanks.
JFAC and for all your hard work on this.
Great.
valuable.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good night. Bye bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Good night.